Hey everyone, and welcome to another Konoha Reviews. Today we have a real retro review as we dive back deep into the 90s and the time of the Nintendo 64. Though I had an NES when I was a kid, I wasn't too obsessed with gaming back then. It wasn't until the Nintendo 64 that I really started getting an interest in gaming, as I saw entire worlds and stories come to life that I'd never imagined. Up until this day, the Nintendo 64 stands as my favorite console of all time. During the Nintendo 64 age, one of the powerhouses making games for the console was Rare. Nowadays, Rare unfortunately could not even stand in the shadow of what the company once was, with flop after flop after flop being released since the era of the original Xbox. But on the Nintendo 64, they had amazing classics like Banjo-Kazooie, GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, Jet Force Gemini, Conker's Bad Fur Day, and Donkey Kong 64. Before most of those games came out though, they released a title called Diddy Kong Racing that took the consoles by storm. Rare was of course responsible for the Donkey Kong game series since the Super Nintendo. Thus they had now the chance to make a party racer with the world and characters that they had created. Instead of focusing on Donkey Kong and some of the main characters from that series, they decided to give his buddy Diddy a chance, along with many other characters including Banjo, who would show up in the upcoming Banjo-Kazooie game, and Conker, who would star in Rare's final game on the Nintendo 64. The creation of party racers was nothing new since the release of Super Mario Kart. Mario Kart 64 by that time was considered one of the best party games, and copies soon came after, including Crash Team Racing, and on later consoles of course, also Sega racing games. Many agree that though these games are fun, none of them can get close to the magical feeling of what Mario Kart has to offer. But there are quite a few people, me included, that think that Diddy Kong Racing actually was better than Mario Kart 64 and therefore holds the title of Best Party Racer for that console. It is so good in fact that it is still fun to play today. Let's begin first to talk about the graphics. The Nintendo 64 was a bit more powerful than the PlayStation 1, and therefore the world and its characters look fuller and overall just better. Because all of the characters are super cartoony, the graphics actually still hold up. If they were portrayed as realistic humans or cars, then of course it would look absolutely horrible by today's standards. But also because of how bright and vibrant the colors of the world and each stage are, it is just a very pleasant game to look at, even now. You have your typical stage settings including grasslands, volcanoes, ice levels, and tropical races. I will say that though overall Diddy Kong Racing is a better game than Mario Kart 64, this does not necessarily hold up in terms of the race levels themselves. Mario Kart 64 still does that the best, with each stage feeling so unique and varied. In Diddy Kong Racing, some of the stages feel quite bland, like a random medieval town or grasslands with windmills spread all over them. They lack personality. Despite the characters all feeling coherent to the world, as in the world of Donkey Kong, the stages simply do not, and that is a real shame since there could have been a lot of Easter eggs or fan service to references of Donkey Kong and co. Instead, you just get random villages, dinosaur plains, and other areas that don't feel to belong in the same world or setting. But at least the graphical presentation is great and the music is absolutely awesome and really shows how talented the studio was back in the day. It will only take a few seconds before another race music track gets stuck inside your head. It's really well done, and I caught myself humming some of the tunes many times over after I was done playing the game. The story of Diddy Kong Racing is a simple one, where the evil entity Whizpig has rumbled with space and time, and you are now tasked with racing in different worlds, collecting balloons as you win first prize, to eventually do a boss race against his minions, and then eventually beat Whizpig himself in a 1-to-1 race. Basically, what is really smart here is that instead of just doing races that you select from a menu, you get a full-fledged adventure mode. You have a hub world, where you can explore around and collect hidden balloons to open doors to new races and worlds, challenge the Elephant Magician in races around the hub area, or just cruise around and figure out how to unlock secrets. In front of each race is a gate with the set number of balloons that you need in order to be able to participate in this race. It's basically the same as with Mario and how many stars he needs before a certain door can be opened to enter the next world. Each of the worlds, of which there are 4, have 4 individual races that you need to complete in order to face the boss of that world. With 16 racetracks in total, that was already quite a high number for back in the day. The cool thing too in this game is that there are multiple types of vehicles to race in. Most of the races are done in the old trusty kart, but water races are done with the hovercrafts, where races basically feel like you're playing wave race, and some races are done in planes, where you need to dodge obstacles in the air and can take advantage from the height difference. There are even some races where you get to choose your own vehicle, and you can have races where some of the participants race in a kart and others in vehicles like a hovercraft or a plane. That creates really dynamic gameplay and shows how far ahead of its time this game was, since we got something similar in games way later with MotorStorm. Once you have won the 4 races in each world, you can face the boss of that particular world. These are giant creatures like a triceratops, a giant octopus, a walrus, and a dragon. These races are one-on-one, and you simply need to reach the end before they do. But these races are quite challenging, as running into your opponent will slow you down, and there are often obstacles along the road like falling rocks or mines in the water. The bosses also all cheat, as they take a head start before the countdown is complete. Luckily, you can yourself also make use of this with a boost at the starting line. Once you have defeated these bosses, they all tell you the same thing. Do the races in their world again, but now collect 8 silver coins spread across the racetrack and finish first. This is basically an excuse to lengthen the game and give you a reason to race some of the tracks again. But I think this is good, since it gives you something else to do on the tracks you already know. In Mario Kart 64, there was no such thing, and so you just had to replay the levels for no reason other than that you had played all of them and you weren't done playing yet. In Diddy Kong Racing, it gives you a new objective and a new goal. I do have to say that though most of the beginning races are very easy to pull off to collect all the coins and finish first, in the final stages it does become a bit tedious, especially since the AI is also much harder here, and it often takes a few trial and errors to figure out where all the coins are on the track. Once you have collected the coins and finished first again in all of the races on that world, you get to race the bosses also a second time, but this time they have been upgraded. They are often faster, and the obstacles have become more annoying. Then, if you have defeated all of them a second time, you finally get to race Whizbig and complete the game in one final race. But wait, that is not all. In fact, there are still quite a lot that this game has to offer and proves just why it is so good back in the day, since it was just chock full of content. Once you have completed the boss run a second time, you can do the races of that particular world in a Grand Prix mode, much like you can do cups in Mario Kart. So you do a series of 4 races with points being divided amongst the rankings that get brought over each race. If you win each Grand Prix, you can unlock a new character to play as. And that is not all. In one of the 4 levels in each world, a golden key is hidden out of sight. If you find this key and finish, luckily you don't need to finish first, a new level gets unlocked in that world that is not a race, but a versus mode game, sort of like a minigame. These versus mode games can actually be played single player too, unlike Mario Kart 64's battle mode that had to be done multiplayer. The types of versus games that get presented also vary with, for example, the classic Battle Royale mode where you need to hit each other with projectile weapons, much like you know from Mario Kart with the balloons, but also more original modes like the one where everybody's in a plane and you need to capture an egg and bring it back to your base so it can hatch. The hatching actually takes a few seconds, and the other players or NPCs have the chance to steal that egg away from you as long as it hasn't hatched yet. It's frantic and fun, though by today's standards, of course, very vanilla. But again, I want to emphasize just how much different content there was in this game, and that for a racing game. If you win all of the 4 different versus minigames, you can unlock a time trial mode, and through that unlock another character to play as. Phew! And with that, I think I've mentioned most of what this game has to offer. It is such a well-made game, and well thought out to enrich the experience instead of presenting a bland racing game with menus to select everything from. Since the graphics are so cartoony, they still hold up along with a world that's vibrant with colors and awesome catchy music. There's just so much stuff to do and different excuses to do the races over and over again, and it honestly is still so much fun playing this today. the final score I'm going to give this game is an 8.6, a testament of how some of the games from the Nintendo 64 still hold up today. Now, it might indeed be a bit of nostalgia speaking here, but I can, for example, also say that games like GoldenEye 64 and Jet Force Gemini have not stood the test of time. Luckily, it is evident of how talented the people at Rare were back in the day, since they had produced this marvelous gem. If there ever will be a Nintendo 64 Mini, let's hope they will include this precious title among the lot.